Who's the stupidest person you've ever met? And what story perfectly sums up their stupidity? Story 1. My brother and I were in the kitchen one day as teenagers. My brother was filling the sink to wash dishes. When the sink was nearly full, he went to turn the tap off, but it wouldn't budge, so the water kept flowing. I tried turning it too, but with no success. This is when the panic set in. The level of the water was rising fast, and we didn't want to flood the kitchen. He took big saucepans out of the cupboard to fill with water to keep things from overflowing, while I was in a frantic scramble under the sink trying to find the mains to turn it off there. I couldn't find it. Now really panicking, I took over the pot filling duty, and my brother went running off to look for Dad as quick as he could. Dad came running in with my brother while we were shouting at him about looking for the mains. Dad just came over to the sink and pulled the plug out of the hole, letting all the water down the drain. Story 2. When I was in the Navy, there was a cook on my ship. He once served rare chicken. I genuinely couldn't tell whether he was trying to cover up his limitless incompetence or if he genuinely believed that rare poultry was a real thing. He was careless enough to believe it. Another time he just filled a pan with ground beef and called it meatloaf. Another time he was supposed to make sugar cookies. Several hundred of them for the whole crew. He didn't bother to read the label on the container he opened, and apparently he didn't taste the batter at any point, and he actually made salt cookies. He used up all the remaining salt in the pantry, and we had unseasoned food for the remaining several weeks of the mission, during which time the captain assigned someone to be the cook's bodyguard. Story 3. My flatmate at university put a whole bunch of effort into forging 10-pound notes. Researched paper, found some spray adhesive that was just the right consistency, got hold of a very sharp craft knife and cutting board, figured out how to fake the metal strip and watermark with kitchen foil and crafty printing. He had an excellent printer. His copies were pretty good, but by no means perfect. So he and his accomplice Joe decided to keep to 2 simple rules. Only use them in dimly lit bars when it was too busy for staff to check every note, and only ever take 1 copy out of the house. That way, if they were caught, they could claim it was an honest mistake. They got them in their change, etc. Well, at first it worked surprisingly well. They'd buy 1 drink with the dodgy 10, pocket the change, and nip back to the flat to grab another. In fact, it worked so well that they got overconfident. One day, my flatmate was out with Joe in a crowded area in broad daylight when they decided to roll a joint. Joe took a bag out of his pocket and passed it over, right in front of 2 police officers. Of course, the officers stopped and searched them and found over 200 pounds worth of forged notes, all with the same serial number. Story 4. I had a next-door neighbor who robbed a Howard Johnson's at the top of our street at gunpoint, wearing a ski mask. He took the money, took off the mask, and was walking home, 2 blocks down, said street, when cops pulled him over and found the mask, the gun, and the money. He was drunk and asked them, "Would it help if I said I'm sorry?" He got a couple of years in Rikers Island, came out, broke into a local apartment house, stole some money and jewelry, got stuck out on a fire escape when the ladder wouldn't go down, and he had closed the window behind him. Couple more years. That's 2 stories, I guess. There are a few more, but you get the picture. He did leave me a box of cassettes when he went up one time, among them the Allman Brothers Live at the Fillmore. I became a lifelong fan, so thanks. Unnamed next-door failed robber. He was actually a really nice guy and like a young Ray Liotta handsome. Just dumb as a brick. Story 5. A guy I worked with named Buddy bought a huge Snap-on rollaway toolbox for over $3,000 on credit. 2 days later, he sold it to a coworker for $1,500 because he had some overdue bills and had to pay them. Needless to say, he never paid Snap-on for the toolbox and disappeared after he was fired for starting his 4th fight at work. One of the other guys I worked with told the Snap-on salesman where Buddy's new job was, and last we heard they are now garnishing his wages. Buddy was a strange character. He had very thin skin, and the slightest thing would set him off. He would go absolutely nuts when pushed. He yelled at the security guard and threatened to have him fired because he didn't like his tone. He almost got fired 3 times for fighting, but he was able to win the department manager over until the 4th time. Oh, and one time he was told to put caution tape across a malfunctioning gate, and he said, "I don't know how." Story 6. There was this guy at my high school who wasn't too bright and was mostly harmless, but about halfway through decided he was going to be a thug. One day he went into a class of first years when their teacher wasn't there and took all their electronics, cash, and valuables at knife point without covering his face. Before he left, he gave them his real name saying, "And you better not tell them it was me, Jim Conrad, that took all your stuff." He then proceeded to leave school grounds with all the stolen things, but decided against stashing them off campus. Instead, he came back with everything still in his backpack and went to spy on the class with his backpack full of loot, while police officers were there taking statements to make sure no one was hiding anything. Story 7. I helped a client out to his car with some merchandise. He struggled for a bit to get into the vehicle. I jokingly asked if it was his car. He backed up, looked at it, and said, "Nope, no, this is not my car," and went to a different color and make of car in the lot. There were only 3 cars in the whole lot. Edit. He was not elderly or showing any obvious difficulties. Not to say he didn't, but we had a lot of interaction with him, and he mostly just didn't listen or pay attention. I work in a veterinary clinic, so he was a client, not a customer. I was helping him out with some dog food. He did have 2 vehicles, but one was a big pickup and the other was a small car. 2 of the vehicles were cars and one was an SUV. I remember because it was such a bizarre exchange. And the cars were nothing alike. I don't remember exact models, but one was maroon and one was silver. He was notorious for being forgetful. No matter what we did or explained, after an appointment, he would always forget everything we had said and lose the paperwork we sent home. His girlfriend would always call upset, saying we told him nothing of what was going on with the dogs or how to use the medications. He liked to argue with the veterinarians that whatever they diagnosed was wrong. They currently go to another local clinic after fighting with one of our vets, but will come back after fighting with the other one. They've been back and forth a few times, and he also bought a puppy and wanted its ears cut. We don't do that, so he went a couple states away to have it done, but then didn't tape them up properly. Now they're cut and floppy. The poor dog is sweet but untrained and looks awkward because of this man. Story 8. I am sure if I thought real hard I could come up with someone more clueless, but this story is pretty good. There was this receptionist at the veterinary office we've taken our dogs to over the years who argued with my dad about how to pronounce his own name. He went in to pick up a prescription for our dog Daisy, and this girl asked the typical name of dog, name of owner type questions. "We have it listed as Michelle, and you don't look like a Michelle," she said. Dad asked how it was spelled on the monitor, and sure enough, it was spelled Michael, Dad's name. He said, "That says Michael. That's my name." And she argued with him about it. He had to get his driver's license out to show her, and even though she finally let him pick up what he came for, she insisted my dad had been mispronouncing his own name for 50+ years. The best part is Dad told us this story, and we thought nothing of it, until 3 months later when Mom took the dog in for a checkup. The girl still thought the owner of the dog was Michelle and that my mom must be in a relationship with a woman. Mom gently corrected her that it was Michael. And again, this girl insisted it was pronounced Michelle. Mom, amused, said something along the lines of, "It's literally a name from the Bible. It's pronounced Michael and has been for thousands of years." The receptionist sat in silence, only speaking the minimal amount for the rest of that visit. Story 9. This girl I went to school with thought Earth had 2 moons and adamantly argued with me and a teacher. Edit. I should have included more information, but I'm new to this, so I apologize. The girl thought that there were 2 moons of the same size, one on each half of Earth. She thought that the Earth didn't rotate while in orbit. She also thought that since the sun was so big and bright, it blocked the moon during the day. None of what she said made sense, and she would not answer any further questions or follow up with any rebuttals. I did not try to make her feel bad. I don't like doing that to anyone for any reason. Once I saw how set she was on what she believed, I backed off because I'm not one to force any views, facts, or opinions on someone. I never said that I don't give my opinion or present facts. I do. I will always say what I have to say, but after a certain period of time, when a conversation comes to a complete standstill and nothing is getting through, I choose to walk away. I do so knowing that I tried my best and nothing I can do will be effective. Story 10. I work for a small retailer and we had that guy for a while. He would call every day and ask the same questions. And no, not in different ways or something that could be construed as clever. The same person also couldn't figure out the key fob for his own car and had to have his 5-year-old daughter let him into it. He has kids. Let that sink in for a second. He was incapable of basic math beyond addition and subtraction. When we buy things and tell him he gets 30%, he didn't understand what that meant. He also asked every time how much he was getting, despite not understanding the answer. I'm not sure he actually knew how to drive. We have a dumpster in our parking lot and he managed to bump it every time with his car. Every time he left, we had to go move it because he hit it on the way in and out. Back to the fact that he was a father somehow. He was also an awful parent. We witnessed him telling his kids they were worthless and terrible, stupid, dumb, and any number of insults that were more applicable to himself. Unfortunately, that's not something we could report to CPS. I watched him on more than one occasion fail to open the door to the bathroom and simply walk into it face first. He once came in with a hamburger of some kind and, while eating it, pulled a packet of mustard out of his pocket. He didn't put this mustard on his hamburger. Instead, he bit into the packet and sucked the mustard out. I could keep going. One time, he left his daughter in the car and she locked herself out with the key inside. Instead of walking 2 buildings down to the car repair place, he took a rock and broke the driver's side window. Our store has both a publicly accessible web page for making orders from home, as well as in-store kiosks. Despite him owning a modern Android smartphone and using it to look up food, he claimed he didn't have internet to use our website from home. His wife, or girlfriend, I don't actually know, called him just about every time he was in, and he lied to her every time, saying he was on the way home and stuck in traffic. As many of you might have guessed, he wasn't particularly well-groomed, although he usually had something in his hair. What that something was, I'm not sure. I think that's all I've got. He recently moved further away, so we don't see him very often anymore. Story 11. In everyone's military career, there is that guy you kind of want to help, then realize it's a waste. My that guy didn't just take the cake. He took the cherry on top too. First encounter with him was when I found his weapon in a porta potty. I walked out with my weapon and his, saw a higher-ranking sergeant, and turned the weapon over to him. Turns out this was that guy's squad leader. 10 minutes later, I saw him doing rifle PT and full battle rattle with a sign around his neck stating, "I forgot my weapon in the bathroom. Don't be like me. I'm a fool." This would not be the last time he lost his weapon or important field gear. I found out later the unit tried to dump him onto another battalion. He got sent back to us for refusing to cut his hair and follow various other orders. When we were overseas, he had a random outburst in the chow hall, shouting nonsense. We found out it was because his ex-wife was dating other people. Later on, he had his weapon taken away because he threatened to shoot members of his squad. Not long after that, he was caught watching inappropriate material on duty. There were a slew of other incidents as well. After deployment, he got put onto my crew as my driver. He wasn't allowed to drink because he would get sloppy drunk and overdramatic. He once threatened me that he was going to turn himself in to the sheriff's office instead of reporting for duty because he got rejected by some girl. When I told him to do it because I wasn't a babysitter, he started sobbing, saying it was my job as his sergeant to fix his problems. Unfortunately, he showed up the next day for duty. For some reason, he decided to tell the section he was a webcam model. We asked how he knew they were girls and not guys, and he said, "You can tell." Turns out he was showing himself online to both men and women for $2.99 a minute. The night before going out to the field, we do inspections to make sure everyone packs what they need. He took it upon himself to wake up early and remove all his clean uniforms and clothing from his bags. So he left for 2 weeks in the field, no showers out there, with only field gear and the clothes on his back. We figured this out on day 3 when his stench was billowing out of his driver's hatch. Not to mention he was constantly doing inappropriate things while still in the track. Just add that to the stench and mess going on up there. More often than not, my number 1 man would have to smack him to wake him up when we got fire missions. He would give us life advice on how to scam the VA and other forms of government support. He told us an easy way to get free cash was to put your name on class action lawsuits. At one point, he told me the Army owed him his sergeant stripes because he had been in for 9 years, and it was the least they could do for him. I told him I would never allow that to happen as long as I was in the Army. He had no filter for saying ridiculous things. It was like his burned-out brain was directly linked to his mouth. Unfortunately for the rest of us, we wore CVC helmets, which meant constant communication with 3 other people. He was the bane of my existence for 3 years. In the end, I got him to leave the Army. We all end up reflecting on that guy. People get annoyed that he is basically living off $2,600 a month from various assistance programs. I ask them, do you really want that guy in the workforce? This is the safest situation for all of us. Sleep easy at night knowing he isn't in the Army anymore. Story 12. My in-laws came to visit us a few weeks ago. They got an Airbnb flat nearby because our place is too small to accommodate them, and, well, MIL always does silly things that infuriate me, so I can't have her around me 24/7. I went to pick them up in my car. Note that she had been in this car numerous times before. Their saving grace was that they were ready for me on time, but to walk the approximate 50 yards from the front door to my car took about 5 minutes because Mel gets so easily distracted. "Oh, look, Frank. That looks like a frog," she said as she bent down to pick up a blob-shaped piece of metal that had been driven over hundreds of times. She showed it to Phil, Frank, and they stood in the middle of the street observing this thing. I was on the other side of the street trying to beckon them onwards and away from this dirty piece of junk they had discovered. I was also looking at all of the windows to see if anybody was watching this embarrassing display. Finally, Mel started moving again and tried to open the door of the car that happened to be closest to where I was standing. Remember, she had been in my silver car many times. She was trying to open the door of a black car. How the alarm didn't go off, I'll never know. She even asked me why I was standing next to a car that wasn't mine. Well, the street was jam-packed with parked cars, and this just happened to be the one closest to me when her frog discovery stopped me in my tracks. So we eventually got around the corner to where my car was parked. It was a busy, narrow street with lots of traffic, so you don't want to waste any time getting into the car. One of them had to get in the side away from the pavement because the pavement side seat had my son's baby seat installed. God, they stood in the middle of this road holding up traffic while they looked for something to wrap this frog thing in. I was feeling the heat and told them to hurry up because it was dangerous, and the cars that decided not to pass were getting impatient. Once they were finally in the car, Emil joked that I was talking to them as if they were my 2-year-old son. Story 13. In a third-year chemistry course, we were working with titanium 4 chloride or titanium tetrachloride or TiCl4. A bit of background information. TiCl4 is extremely dangerous. Not only is it an incredibly strong acid, it is also highly volatile and reacts violently with water, including water vapor in the air, to generate hydrochloric acid, colorless, and titanium hydroxide, a dense white cloud. When the container is opened, the titanium tetrachloride vaporizes rapidly and plumes of white smoke begin spilling out of the bottle. Due to these properties, special precautions must be taken when handling it. It is kept in special containers. You must wear gloves when handling anything that has been in contact with it. And most importantly, the bottle can only be opened in the fume hood, basically a box with a powerful vacuum attached to prevent harmful vapors from escaping into the room. One guy opened it at his workstation instead of in a fume hood as required. Billows of white smoke immediately rose from his bottle and he began choking. Instead of screwing the lid back on, he decided to toss the bottle away. Luckily, the bottle did not break, but titanium tetrachloride spilled everywhere. The higher surface area of a puddle allowed it to vaporize unimaginably fast, ripping the hydrogen out of what little moisture was in the air that cold winter day, and spewing strong acid and poisonous smoke into the room. The entire building was evacuated. I'm not sure what happened after that, since the lab was canceled and I was dismissed. A week later, I walked into the lab and I could still smell hydrochloric acid. I've never seen that guy since. I can only assume he was kicked out of the course. Story 14. A friend in college had lots of clueless moments, but the best story is probably the night she went home with a guy and was freaking out the next day that she might be pregnant. They had not had sex. He had just touched her, but for some reason she thought maybe he had something on his hands and therefore could have gotten some inside her. I never fully understood why she thought this. I vaguely remember her saying something about how he might have been with himself, before he touched her, but she didn't see, I don't know. Don't. Anyway, she was so anxious about this that she decided she needed the morning after pill and got it. Then because of the warnings about how ill it can make you, she came to the conclusion that she needed to tell her parents the whole tale. Honestly, I can't remember her logic here. Why she didn't wait to see if it even made her sick, or why being sick would be suspicious and give her away. It led to a lecture about her behavior. The best part of it, she was studying to be, and now is employed as, a science teacher. Story 15. This French-Italian guy I used to work with. I could seriously write a book about how ignorant, idiotic, and illogical this man was, but this story sums it up pretty well. He was against vaccinations because he thought everything in the world was a government conspiracy. He was also a nature fanatic who believed in homeopathy. He believed clay had almost supernatural healing qualities. When he lived in Denmark, he and his wife couldn't enroll their son in kindergarten unless he had some basic vaccinations, because that's the law. So they went to get the boy vaccinated, but as soon as he got the shot and they walked out of the doctor's office, he took the bandage off and slapped a lump of clay on the boy's arm, right where he got the shot. He believed this would pull the liquid that was in the syringe out of the boy's veins and get absorbed into the clay to be disposed of safely. So in his mind, he had basically unvaccinated the boy, and the health officials had no idea. It's kind of a happy ending, though. His own nonsense saved the day, and the boy now has the vaccinations he should despite his misguided father. Story 16. I was leasing an apartment, and the landlord one day called me up and told me I had to move out immediately because they had a cousin who was going to move in from another state due to some story I didn't care about, and that wasn't my problem. I reminded them that I had a lease with both our names on it, which stated I had 6 months left there, so he needed to find some other arrangement for his cousin. End of conversation. A couple days later, the cousin showed up with a key to the apartment and let themselves in, was very aggressive and in my face about wanting me to leave ASAP. I told them more or less to get out, or I was going to call the cops. They left, but not without a big scene. Next day, I had the locks changed. A couple days after that, the cousin broke into the apartment by kicking in a window, this being the place they were planning on living in. I happened to be there at the time. As soon as I heard the banging on the door and then the window, I called the cops. When the guy came in, he grabbed the phone from my hand, with the 911 call in progress, and started yelling at the operator. I told him it was going to go really badly when the cops showed up, and he had my phone in his hand and a busted window in the apartment. He should probably leave while he could. He did put the phone down, and I snatched it back. We had a general TV drama shouting match for a minute, but I firmly refused to leave, especially since all my stuff was still there. Then he called the cops on me from his phone. I thanked him for doing that, since 2 911 calls from the same place would probably get a faster response. Also, my girlfriend was with me, and his girlfriend, or sister, I don't really know. They looked related, but maybe that's just coincidence, was with him, so they got into their own side fight and also both called the cops. 6 or 8 officers very quickly showed up after all these calls, rammed in the door, and arrested the guy and girl immediately with weapons drawn on them, with him protesting loudly to the cops that I should be arrested because his uncle said he could move in. Yeah, that was obviously going to go well for him. I was seriously amazed at how many cops piled into this apartment, at least a half dozen. The overwhelming odds finally got through to them because the one smart thing they did was allow themselves to be handcuffed without resisting, even though he was muttering about how unfair it was the whole time. The girl just had this resigned and frankly pathetic look that made it clear this wasn't the first time this guy had screwed up and dragged her into a bad situation. I never saw them again or heard any more from the landlord. I gave a basic report to the cops on the scene and showed them the lease and my ID. I never heard from them again either, so I don't know how it worked out for the family. Shortly after this happened, the landlord shut off the power and water. I talked to a lawyer about my rights, but decided it just wasn't worth having a confrontation that might drag on while I was living in a place with no heat or running water in the dead of winter, with a busted window and a door kicked in. So I moved out as fast as I could. I did leave them with a fridge full of rotting food and a seriously nasty toilet, and I didn't pay rent the last month I was there because I didn't expect to get the deposit back at that point. The smell of rotting turkey from that fridge surely permeated the carpet. Story 17. I went to school with a kid called Aaron. His cluelessness was legendary. He got into an argument when we were at the zoo with a zookeeper because he thought tigers were female lions. That zookeeper was the expert on tigers. Aaron thought he won the argument because the keeper walked away. But the best one was in class. It was science class. Our normal teacher, an older woman, was in the hospital to get her left shoulder replaced. We had a substitute teacher come in. Our sub was an Arab woman, the non-religious type. Also, Aaron was openly prejudiced. She walked into class and put her books down. That day we were learning chemistry. You can see where this is going. Immediately, Aaron said that the bomb-making class was down the hall. She gave him a stern look before warning him. 10 minutes later, as she was pouring a very dangerous combination, he decided to scream, "Bomb!" startling the teacher. Because of this, she knocked over the flask and its contents. It started smoking, so she pulled the emergency lever and rushed us out of the room. Aaron ended up getting expelled by the school, his third expulsion in as many years. It turned out the substitute teacher was married to the vice principal. His parents tried and tried to get him back into the school, but they refused. They tried other normal schools, but none would take him. Really wish I knew if he got his dream job as the world's best police officer. Story 18. I used to manage a restaurant, and there was this girl, Emily, who was legendarily clueless. I have 1,000 stories about her, but my favorite involves Subway. One day, Emily came into my office complaining of a hangover while carrying a sub from Subway and going on about how it was the only cure for a hangover. Anyway, I asked her what kind of sub she got, to which she replied, pickle, cucumber, and mayo. I said, "So you spent $10 on a cucumber and mayonnaise sandwich?" And she said, "No, it has pickles on it too." I then said, "Pickles are just vinegar-soaked cucumbers, so it's basically just a cucumber and mayo sandwich." Her mouth dropped. "No way!" she exclaimed. I then had to explain to her the basics of pickling. When I asked her where she thought pickles came from, she replied, "The ocean? I miss that girl." Story 19. I worked with a guy for a while at a maintenance job. We did snow removal. One morning I came in a bit late and was greeted by the story of true, unadulterated idiocy. This guy got a riding lawnmower with a John Deere snow brush attached to the front. Think of how a vacuum works. To remove the snow in a parking lot. He decided that it would be better if the snow blew backwards, toward himself, rather than away from himself for whatever reason, and asked our boss about it. Now our boss hated this guy, and he basically told him to just get the snow moved and be done with it. So what does this guy do? He called John Deere and talked to them for an hour. They told him that yes, you technically can reverse the brush, but it would ruin the machine if run like that for any real amount of time. He proceeded to tell John Deere that they were wrong and tried to do it anyway. The only reason he didn't destroy the brush was because he was inept, and our boss basically told him that if he broke it, he was fired. Story 20. An ex-friend, I found out she was a strict Christian in the unorthodox sense. She didn't necessarily quote scriptures or go around saying we were all doomed, but one time I brought tarot cards and she freaked out. She was screaming at me to put them away, so I did. Another time I was talking about how I was once mistaken by a nurse as having meningitis when I had migraines. Then she went off on a tangent, saying that modern medicine and doctors are all wrong, and you can only heal through prayer or home remedies. After a difficult experience at the hospital with her younger brother, she and her mother tried to sue the place and the doctor who treated him and asked my mother to help their case. Because the mumps were going around and the doctors suspected he may have had them, he ran tests and then sent him to another hospital to be treated just in case. They found out he just had an infection, but the two of them were upset that the first doctor thought it was mumps and tried to sue. The charges were immediately dropped when they saw the price tag, and my mother's co-worker, a lawyer, told them that their case wouldn't stand in court. I have not seen them or the family since. Story 21. I was at university with a guy who was academically brilliant, but was seriously life stupid. He would ace every exam he ever took, but had zero common sense and just seemed to lurch through life from one dumb situation to the next. We'll call him Rob because that was his actual name. My absolute favorite example of this was the time he lost his little notebook. It was a pocket-sized notebook that he used to draft thoughts, ideas, poems in. He was an English literature major and was also in the process of drafting a screenplay. So this journal of pretentious scribblings was apparently pretty valuable to him. Anyway, he was running for a bus one day, and it fell out of his pocket, but he didn't realize until he got home. He was pretty bummed out because there was no way of him replacing it, but he appeared to have been handed a lifeline when he got a text message from a guy who had found the book on his way home, which had Rob's number written inside. Great. The problem was that the information page in the front of the notebook also had a section which said, "Reward if found," and then a space for you to write an amount. As a joke, Rob had written £100 because he obviously couldn't have foreseen a situation where he would ever have to pay it. Well, the guy who found it, who was a seriously grumpy old man, basically demanded the reward money or he wouldn't give the book back. Rob tried to explain to him that it was just a joke and that he was a student and couldn't afford £100, so please just give it back. But the old guy wasn't budging at all. Rob was actually just going to cough up the money to get it back. But we all convinced him that it was crazy to pay a stranger £100 for literally no reason. Rob was going to the guy's house to collect it, so it wasn't like this old guy was having to put any effort in or go anywhere. He wasn't being inconvenienced in any way. We told Rob just to take him a bottle of wine as a thank you gesture, but to stand firm that he didn't owe him any money. Anyway, Rob goes to this guy's house, tries to give him the bottle of wine, but the man told him that he didn't drink, so he didn't want it. But he still wanted the money. Rob was apparently just standing in this guy's living room, basically being mugged because of his own stupid joke. In the end, Rob ended up compromising and giving the guy £50 just to get out of the situation. The best part of the story? On the way home, the bottle of red wine that the old guy wouldn't take broke in Rob's backpack, destroying not only the notebook, but also his cell phone. Story 22. My current roommate, he has quite a few character traits that make him a poor roommate. A complete lack of understanding of when he should be quiet, general uncleanliness, and subpar social skills. The thing that stands out to me, though, is that he is profoundly adept at losing things. He has lost his phone on multiple occasions and is on his second since I met him. He has lost his student ID more times than I can count. Recently, he got a second student ID in case he lost the first, and within 2 days of acquiring the second, he had lost both. The most mind-boggling example of this, though, is when he lost his bike. We live on a campus where biking is incredibly popular, which attracts a good amount of bike thieves. Because of this, as a student here, it is very likely that your bike will be stolen, or you will know someone whose bike is stolen. So one morning, my roommate went out to bike to class and realized he couldn't find his bike. He understandably assumed it had been stolen. He filed a police report, and they told him if anything came up or if he had any updates, to give them a call. In the meantime, he bought a new bike to get to classes quickly. A few weeks went by, and one day he came into our room extremely excited and proclaimed that he had found his bike. It was parked at the dorm next to ours, not 50 feet from where he usually parked it. He called the officer that he filed the report with and said that he had found his bike. When asked where he found it, he said to the officer, "I found it at the dorm next to ours. It was weird though. It was locked up with my lock. I don't know why the thief, would put my lock back on and park it so close to where they took it from." Story 23. At the pre-cell phone era time, I worked in a machine shop that had mostly male employees. When I was invited to camp with a few of them, I decided to go. I liked camping and boating and had no reason not to. I drove my own car. The boss drove his. 2 others drove theirs. But one guy, he left his apartment in his car, towing a trailer with his boat, only to break down on the highway a few miles from home. When someone stopped to offer help, instead of doing something logical like going home and fixing his car, he left his car on the shoulder of the highway and managed to talk the Good Samaritan into towing his boat to the lake. He got there and launched into the first of many comments about how his car broke down because I was there. "It's just like having a woman on a boat," he said over and over again. Well, whatever. The entire group climbed into the 2 boats, his and the supervisor's, to go fishing on the water. As dusk set in, they needed to get the boat's lights on, but his boat didn't actually have lights, so he borrowed a flashlight from the supervisor to tie to the boat. Except, oops, he dropped it in the water before he could. Cue more comments about a woman on a boat, except I wasn't even on his boat, so it was getting darker. The supervisor asked if anyone wanted to sleep on his boat, And I opted to because I didn't really want to hear any more from the guy since I could very well have gotten into it with him over his idiotic remarks. Next morning, I heard about all the excitement I'd missed. He tried to get back to camp but landed a mile downshore, where he left his boat while trying to find the campsite. He finally found the tents and sat drinking with everyone till the early hours of the morning, complaining all the while about me being there. Eventually, he pulled out a gun he had packed and let off a few rounds into the sky before others convinced him to shut up and sleep it off. Of course, he hadn't actually brought a tent, so he rolled out some blankets near the campfire. You bet, it caught on fire. Next day, we were getting ready to leave. He asked me to give him a ride back to his apartment. He actually asked me to tow his boat first, and when I said no, decided he would come back for it, because everyone else refused. Story 24. I love my mother, but a few months ago, she asked me if I could go home, log into the house computer, open her email, and email my aunt, whose home she was at, some paperwork or a picture or whatever. When I asked her why she didn't just log into her email from my aunt's computer, she said, "How the hell am I supposed to do that? It's on my house computer." I tried to explain how email worked for a few minutes, and she just got more and more angry at how stupid I was. It took me calling my dad to call her and try to explain it to her. My dad is a geek. He ended up emailing it to my aunt. Another time she was going on and on about my brother's new cat, and she showed me this post he made on Facebook. It was a viral cat video. I told her it wasn't his cat, it was just a funny cat video he shared online. She said, "Why would he video someone else's cat and post pictures of it? Stupid girl, it's his cat." There are sadly a lot more stories like this. She's not keeping up with technology well at all. She also has a spreadsheet she's been working on for years that tracks all of the lotto numbers. She's convinced there's a pattern and she's going to find it. We're not getting a cut because we tease her about it. Story 25. This guy we'll call Tony, who I went to high school with. He dropped out of high school months shy of graduating to work in a weld shop. His older brother worked there too and got him the job. To be fair, $18 an hour is a very decent income for an 18-year-old. Literally weeks later, he got himself a $60,000 truck with all the fittings, and since his car payments were greater than his income, he used a line of credit to pay the rest. Dude was 18 and using debt to pay his debt. The rest of us hadn't even graduated from high school yet, and this guy had already racked up 3 times the debt I have incurred from 6 years at university. Looking back on this now, some people at the bank made some serious oversights. Around this period, he began dating a girl. It was highly questionable, but, as far as I know, not legally prohibited. He paid a friend to ink his name on her lower back. It was terrible. Anyway, he attended our graduation after party in his very shiny, very expensive truck, and chose to get drunk and drive home. He ended up in a crash that resulted in 2 fatalities, and he sustained a severe brain injury. He is currently incarcerated for a very long sentence. The last I heard, he had assaulted another inmate and exhibited other violent conduct in prison, leading to his transfer to a maximum security facility 100 miles away. Did I mention that the girl later became a mother to his son? Story 26. My ex-friend, she's a compulsive liar, whose lies are always very sloppy and obvious. When we were arguing over her getting angry with me for being too upset after my best friend died to go to color guard practice the next day, God forbid, right? Anyway, I sent her a really personal message, sort of saying that I wasn't in a great place and just needed to be left alone, to which she copied, edited to make it sound like I was being rude, and sent it back to me. She tried telling me that her phone glitched. Another much lighter story because both were too good. She and I were trying to enlist, however, she couldn't pass the ACE VAB. It's almost impossible to fail. She started getting really angry with me for scoring a pretty good score and started lying about Harvard harassing her, begging for her to go study with them. She did have a good GPA, but her ACT scores were, well, much like her ASVAB scores. She even went as far as buying a Harvard hoodie from H&M and claiming that Harvard sent it to her. Story 27. It was raining out when I got to my friend's house with a buddy. Everyone was leaving and getting into a vehicle and prompted us to tag along. Not knowing what was going on, I told my buddy to hop in. As we were driving down the main road in my city, Portage Avenue, towards an area just out of town, the people explained that they were going to rob a Husky gas station. I realized I was in the wrong situation and told them how stupid they all were and to let me out. One of my friends turned around with a knife and told me I was going to be involved and that there was no way they would let me out. I didn't know how to react, but I knew they couldn't force me to be a criminal, so I burst out laughing. We were driving and I noticed that some of them were drunk and high, not in a good state of mind. The buddy I brought was all about it, started putting on a mask and stuff. I remained quiet until we got to the destination. So foolish, they did 2 laps around the place and finally stopped in behind the store. The guys got out to rob the place and I got out and just walked away. The friend whose house it was decided to tag along with me, and I'm glad he did. He wasn't the brightest, but obviously smarter than the rest. I was young at the time, so I called my only friend with a car and said, "Man, some hectic stuff went down. I'm stranded an hour outside the city. Can you help me?" Solid dude, won't forget that. Got home and found out the next day half of them got taken down by police dogs. They drove away from the city and crashed in a cornfield. Drove right past the RCMP station like what the hell. The friend I was with threw away a scholarship to Tampa Bay for rollerblade hockey. The big guy in the group got ripped up by dogs so bad it was gross, fat hanging out. Another dude got his groin bitten by a dog. One last guy hid $1,000 in the cornfield and later retrieved it when charges were dropped because of the severity of the dog attack and the lack of video evidence. They put the dog down and released them a month later. You don't have to be a leader, but don't be a follower. Story 28. It would have to be the woman who lived next door to us when we lived in New Jersey. She had bought 2 Persian kittens, a male and a female. As the kittens grew, one day as we sat in her kitchen, I noticed that the female was in heat. I made a comment about how she needed to keep the 2 separate, and she said, "Oh no, that has already been taken care of." I figured she meant that she had already had the male neutered. 2 months later, she called me in a panic one morning, saying there was something wrong with the female. I went over to check the cat out because I was a licensed vet tech at the time. When I entered her house, I discovered the female Persian, still just an 8-month-old kitten, in active labor with a kitten stuck in the birth canal. It was trying to come out with the middle of its back first, so I had to turn the kitten and help it get through the birth canal and out, since this was her first. 4 kittens later, we were all finished and we were sitting at her table having coffee. I asked her how the female got bred in the first place, because I knew she was never outside, and I thought the male was neutered. She looked me dead in the face and said, "Oh, Charlie, the male, isn't neutered." I said, "But when I told you to make sure to separate them when Charlotte, the female, was in heat, you told me that had already been taken care of. If you didn't neuter Charlie, what did you mean?" She said, and was as serious as a heart attack. Well, I sat them both down and I told them several times that they are brother and sister and they should never mess around with each other. I thought they listened to me, but I guess not. Story 29. This will be buried, but it's ongoing, so it helps to vent. My SIL is the most reckless person I have ever met. She is currently out on bond for her 4th, maybe 5th OY, her 2nd with her kids in the car, all within 2 years. So they are all felonies because they happened within 5 years of the last. She also has no license, yet continues to drive daily. I have no idea how she is not in jail and without custody of her kids, except the county she's in is notorious for being lenient and knocking down OWI and probation violations. We are in the process of trying to help get the kids out of her control. It's hard. You'd think drinking and driving with your kids at least twice, and drinking around them daily to the point she can't be woken for the school run, would be enough for someone to step in officially. But no, her county and her probation officer are useless. We live in fear of overnight phone calls, dreading the one where we hear those kids are badly hurt or worse. I wish I could just go get them and keep them with my kids, safe and with everything their mom isn't providing, but I can't. I have to hold my breath and hope someone in authority finally does their job. Story 30. I once worked a job that involved vehicles with advertisements on them. While the advertisement wasn't our main product, it did bring in a fairly hefty income to a company that ran vehicles which, by nature, soaked up cash like a sponge soaks water. We had one vehicle that didn't have the traditional ads on the side underneath the windows, but was wrapped in vinyl with an advertisement over every square inch of the outside except the operator's windows. This car was very popular with our general manager despite its overall poor condition, because every day it was recorded as being in service. We got almost as much money as the other vehicles combined brought in. The downside was that this vehicle was a real mess. It had several major failures and got to the point where most employees refused to operate it. At the time, I was the night shift supervisor and had been asked for ideas on how to improve service. I was discussing this fact about the operators being hesitant with the GM and how they probably ought to consider leaving it in the shop for a few days and giving the maintenance team as much time as we could in order to fix these issues. It seemed like a decent sacrifice. Maybe 5 days tops for months of good service. He couldn't understand why I'd suggest it. He just wanted to run it as much as possible until it broke down again, because then the ad revenue would surely have brought in enough by then to pay for the maintenance the car needed. I couldn't get him to understand that at the rate we were going, it would take months to get to that point. And when a vehicle fries its own brain because of the Texas heat, you're going to have a bad time. These failures would also delay the other vehicles in service, thus driving our passenger base away. It all came to an end when I was operating that vehicle on a typically hot August evening, and I was getting the warning that the computer was overheating. I was having to move one block at a time, alternating between moving and waiting 5 to 10 minutes for it to cool down enough to try again. After an hour or so, I'd made it halfway back to the garage. I tried moving it one more time, made it about 10 feet, and I heard the absolute loudest bang I've ever encountered. The computer exploded. I laughed so hard I was crying. At that point, we couldn't get it back to the garage under its own power. I had to leave it there with another employee to flag traffic around the stalled vehicle, get in my automobile, and drive a few miles to the place where we kept our tow truck. Then I had to go through the whole process of getting the truck ready and driving this slow, lumbering beast all the way back to where the vehicle was stalled and tow it back to the garage, which in itself took the good part of an hour. After we got everything put away and the tow truck shut down, I went to the office, got on the computer, and sent a status report to the GM that basically said, "This vehicle's brain exploded at X tonight at intersection. It absolutely will not be moving on its own anytime soon. I have arranged to have the operators stay a little late tonight to help do you a favor by putting this in the back of the shop so it won't block in any of the vehicles that actually work. I sure hope that check from the ad company covers this." The GM wasn't happy with me, but I was so jaded at that point that I didn't care. As far as I know, the GM would only approve Band-Aid fixes. I don't think the vehicle got the modifications it really needed until after that guy got fired. Now it's an okay vehicle. Story 31. I worked craft services on a commercial shoot many years ago in Portland because a friend needed somebody. He was having trouble staffing it in general, and the only guy he could find with the right driver's license was this really clueless guy that he had hoped never to hire again. This guy did two things that still blow me away 10 plus years after the fact. Toward the end of the shoot, we were cleaning up, and the clueless dude was helping. One of our tasks was taking extra bags of ice outside and dumping them. When I was trying to tear a bag of ice open to dump it on the ground outside, he pulled out a knife and he stabbed the bag twice while I was holding it. Then he dumped 2 bags of ice down the stairs instead of walking down and dumping it on the ground, causing a guy who didn't notice to slip and fall down the stairs. Luckily, he didn't stab me through the bag of ice, and also the guy who slipped down the stairs wasn't seriously hurt. But I'm sure by now the clueless guy is either gone or has seriously hurt someone. Story 32. I shared one already, but I have another that's really weird. So I was on job sites, new single home construction, all the time, and we were always around kind of the same group of guys depending on what stage the house was in. There was this guy who was tall, had full-sleeve tattoos and a beard. He acted tough and told us all kinds of stuff he did in the military. He said he ran the .50 cal machine gun on the Hummer. He'd tell us all these stories about the people he shot and the kids they had to run over. They weren't allowed to stop because of IEDs. This went on for about 5 years. He said he lived in town and was married with 3 kids. He also said he did real estate on the side, owned part of a bar in the neighboring town, and his dad was a broker at the big real estate firm in town. All of us believed this for 5 years. He was very convincing, and we had no reason to doubt him. Until another guy who actually served in the military started working with us. One day, the new guy called him out for a story he told that didn't make sense. Turns out he ended up getting fired because he lied about his service to get the job. He wasn't an agent, didn't own a house, wasn't married, didn't have kids. His dad wasn't a broker, didn't own part of any bar. Nothing he said was true for the 5 years we knew him. Found out he lived with his mom in some rundown apartment building on the edge of town. I saw him at a bar last year standing outside smoking with some guys. As I walked past him, he was telling them about his military career. Story 33. Some guy I met in high school. He was one of those super pro-weed and open about it kind of guys. Posted all these medical benefits of weed on Facebook, but everyone knew the dude just wanted to get high. I remember him talking about skipping classes so he could hook up with his girlfriend in the woods. Dude was a super senior and was couch hopping for a good portion of his post-high school life. He ended up getting his girlfriend pregnant and had a baby with her, but they didn't stay together. I kept him as a friend on Facebook just to watch the monthly drama of him constantly getting back together and breaking up with this girl. Anyway, the story that perfectly sums up his downfall was that he got caught by an online police sting operation where they posed either as a child looking for attention or as a parent offering one. He's in jail now. It was honestly quite an entertaining tale told out over the years on Facebook. It was like one long car crash you just couldn't look away from. Story 34. Roommate deciding to make his Instagram into a startup for a reality show about him living with ADHD. He'd sleep at 3 a.m. and wake up at 8 a.m., blast the Nay Nay Whip song, and make clips of him living with ADHD, all while missing his classes. He didn't even know how to properly use a washing machine, and you could tell his mom did everything for him at that point and was just trying to get rid of him. Did I forget to mention how he tried to throw a reggae-themed party a couple of weeks after he tried weed for the first time, in our small living room that was closer to the size of a bedroom? Or the time he bought shrooms and ate them like anchovies out of the bag, and then put his whole hand in a Nutella jar? Did I forget to mention that it wasn't even his Nutella? Yes, he put his hand inside someone else's Nutella, slobbered it all over, and was licking his hand like it was cotton candy you'd get at the mall. Story 35. One of my clients was a millennial. Supposedly, we're all pretty good with technology, but not this guy. He was the textbook definition of a male bimbo. I was working as a color grader on a pro bono project with him. After a few hours in the suite, he was satisfied with the colors, so I uploaded the final version to his YouTube channel. The next day, he came back saying the colors on YouTube looked different from the ones we had agreed on. This was a while ago, and I didn't know that YouTube's compression had slightly altered the colors. Now, an average person comparing the two videos, one on YouTube and one off YouTube, wouldn't notice any difference. You'd need to freeze the same frame and examine them carefully. I had just discovered the change myself, so I adjusted the file to compensate and re-uploaded it. This time, everything was fine. The following day, he returned and complained it looked different on his laptop. He brought it in and compared it to my broadcast monitor. His laptop was a MacBook Pro Retina, and he insisted the contrast was too high. I explained it was his laptop's display and nothing to do with the video itself. But he was adamant that I tweaked the video for his laptop because, according to him, most people will be watching on laptops, not broadcast monitors. I reluctantly agreed and spent several more hours adjusting it. The next day, he claimed it looked different on his friend's MacBook Pro Retina, even though it was the exact same model. I told him no two monitors ever look identical because of calibration differences. He then played his video on every computer in our office at once and was shocked by the differences across all screens. Finally, he turned to me, completely serious, and said, "Just fix it." Story 36. I have a friend who has been catfished by the same girl since high school. She's unbelievably gorgeous and way out of his league, which we've told him countless times, but he refuses to believe it. Supposedly, she's a nurse in California who earns enough money to own a luxurious house and 2 cars, as well as another house and a truck here in Pennsylvania that she bought for them. The problem? She refuses to give him the location of the house or the car. And realistically, what nurse makes that kind of money, let alone uproots her life to buy property for someone she's never met? On top of that, she claims she doesn't own a phone that allows her to actually call him, so they can only text. Yet somehow he helps pay for her phone bill. The icing on the cake? He even got her name tattooed on his chest. This has been going on since 2006, and he has never once met or spoken to this girl in real life. Story 37. My brother got involved in a scam with one of his friends, where he applied for multiple contracts under his own name. The very next day, that friend completely disappeared, leaving my brother stuck with 2 years of payments that add up to almost £1,000 a month. Since my brother doesn't have a job, the responsibility fell on my mother, who now works 2 cleaning jobs, and on me, his younger brother, who works while also studying at university. When he eventually found employment, he quickly became bored. And what frustrated me most was how proudly he told me this story. On his last day at that office job, the one it took him so long to get, which finally gave my mother, who is nearly 50, a little relief. He pulled out a joint, put it in his mouth, walked over to his manager, and simply announced that he quit before walking out. He recounted the story to me like it was heroic, like he was the star of some movie where he was being mistreated by everyone at work. To me, it wasn't clever or admirable. It was irresponsible, immature, and disgusting. Story 38. He never understood what a credit card actually was. At a shopping mall, a sales rep convinced him to sign up for one. They asked him what limit he wanted, and he casually said $2,000 without knowing what that meant. After receiving the card, he started using it for everything. Eventually, he was shocked to discover he had maxed it out and was expected to pay it back, with interest. He had thought it simply pulled money straight from his bank account. I asked him if he had ever looked over the paperwork that came with the card, checked the bills he received, or reviewed his bank transactions. He just admitted he hadn't, saying he has too many bank accounts to keep track of. He constantly opens new ones at different banks. When I asked him why, he basically said he likes it because it feels cool to have a wallet full of cards, as though it makes him look rich. In reality, he is far from wealthy and doesn't even know which account has money available to spend at any given time. Story 39. For my very first hands-on engineering project, I was paired with someone who introduced himself by saying, and I quote, "Are you good at designing and building? Because I'm not. Also, are you good at writing reports? Because I'm terrible at that too." Not the best first impression. Weeks later, my other partner and I, thankfully he was competent, ended up building the entire machine ourselves. All we asked our less helpful teammate to do was decorate it, since there was extra credit for style. A simple task, or so we thought. We returned the next day to find he had drawn a giant Wisconsin W on the machine in red pen. The problem? We studied at Duke. To make matters worse, the project deadline coincided with Duke playing Wisconsin in the NCAA National Championship. The decoration wasn't even finished. He hadn't bothered to color it in. My other partner and I, exhausted after working 30 straight hours without sleep, had to spray paint the whole machine to cover up the mess. Too drained to start the written report, we asked him if he could handle that part instead. We even tried encouraging him by saying, "You know, you're a pretty eloquent guy. Don't doubt your writing." He seemed proud and walked into the back room of the machine shop with his laptop. My partner and I left to rest, confident he would make progress. When we came back, his backpack was still there. Excited, we even bought him some chips from the vending machine as a small reward. But when we opened the door, he was lying on the floor, sound asleep. His laptop was open, but turned off. When we woke him, he said he had typed the heading, he even misspelled my name, before his computer caught a virus and shut off. Then he stood up, claimed he was tired, and walked back to his dorm, despite the fact that the 12-page report was due the next day. After another marathon session in the machine shop, fueled by record-breaking amounts of coffee, my other partner and I managed to write the entire report ourselves. We ended up with a solid B- on the project, and a deep mutual respect for one another that came out of surviving the ordeal.